really the question is about, how do we make sure that certain conditions have preceded the final, triggering kind of condition, right? The final condition, right? So in this case, the final condition is when the RSI crosses 50, right? So that's really the final condition here. All right, and the preconditions are, well, we need to make sure that the RSI was below this 40 level before it crosses the 50 level, right? So in other words, yeah, you want to make sure that the RSI or whatever kind of, oscillator you're working with has made a significant enough dip, or, in the opposite situation, a significant enough rise higher, before it crosses a certain level there. And I already have the RSI on the chart there. Oops. And let's see there. There we go. So I have the 40 line, and then I have the 50 line marked with the white horizontal line, and we also have the 60 line there. All right. So what we are looking for, let's see if I can actually find that situation. Here we go. Wrong square. Let's grab that square. There we go. Right, so that's what we're looking for right there. Let's see if we have the opposite. So we have the opposite condition right there, and also right there. There we go. We got several examples on the chart to work with. Yeah, let me start with this buy right here. Okay, so before we get started, okay, and I'm going to close out the solvers tab there. There we go. Gives us a little more working room. And yeah, so let's start with the first condition here, right? Number one. So, right, so we need a drop below 40, and then, right, and then a cross above 40, right? So, yeah, if we zoom in here. So, in order to get, right, that cross above 40, if you think about this logically, obviously you always have to have, a cross below 40, right? You can't have one without the other, right? Especially when it comes to oscillators, right? So, this might be possible with other scenarios, but with oscillator indicators, you don't have to do that. So really, you can always skip basically step number one, because that's always a guaranteed there. Yeah, so when you're, kind of evaluating these things, ask yourself, is everything, or are all these, are these three conditions all really necessary, right? And of course, it depends on, the type of indicator you're working with. So in the case of, when you're working with an oscillator like the RSI, obviously before the RSI can cross above 40, it has to cross below 40 first, right? So we can skip that one there, unless, and this was not expressed in this question here, so this is kind of why I say details are always very critical. So, maybe you're trying to look for a very specific pattern where you get this quick cross down and quick cross back up, right? For instance, so if you're trying to narrow the number of bars between this cross down and cross up, right? Then, yeah, if you're needing to make sure that the number of bars between those two crosses of the 40 level, then you would need to create the cross down condition and the cross up condition there. So let's see, for example. Well, we almost have an example. So, but say like we'll just have to use the imagination here, right? But we have a cross down right there. And then we get our cross up way over here, right? So there's this huge distance between those two crossover conditions there, right? So maybe that kind of disqualifies the setup there, but obviously we can see here that there is nothing written that disqualifies that. So so we'll just kind of ignore that then for that situation there, because usually what people are just looking for is really the cross up and and the final cross up there. There we go. Get that. This really is what most people are ultimately concerned with, right? It's just that quick cross and across. So, all right. So we'll just kind of focus on that there. So, so this is gonna involve a bunch of crossover solvers, right? And then the final key is figuring out how do we connect, the 40 crossover solver, up with the 50 crossover solver, right? The 50 level. So, all right, so let's start building some crossover solvers here. Ultimately, I'm going to kind of do this backwards here a little bit. All right, let's do the RSI crossing over the 50. So input A is going to be the RSI indicator. All right, and let's do a search for the RSI. There we have it. And the RSI plot is already selected for us, so we're good to go. And of course, I'm just using the default period settings there. And input B, that's going to be the 50 level there. So we're going to set the input type to a fixed value. And then we can type in 50, like so. And there we have it, right? We can see whenever the RSI crosses that 50 level. There they all are. And so right there we have a long cross-up signal right where the arrow's at. So we're all good. So this is the final crossover condition. So now let's build the 40 and the 60, right? The 40 and the 60 crossover levels there. So we're going to actually, this time, let's make a copy of the solver we already made, and we'll paste it there. All right, this time it's going to be a cross up of the 40 level. All right, so we just want the cross up, right? We don't care about, well, I mean, it does say, look at the cross down, but, as we kind of figured out, obviously you don't really need to look at the cross down. So let's just look at the cross up of the 40. And so let's put the 40 level into input B, right? There we go. There's the cross up, but we also have the cross downs. So let's get rid of that, right? Because the cross downs are short signals. Now we don't really need to get rid of that short signal, but for us humans, it's a lot simpler to visualize if all we see are the cross-ups, right? So there, actually, let's move that little triangle over a little bit. There we go. So there's the cross-ups of the 40 level right there. All right. So all we did is in the evaluate, we're just setting it to only calculate the long side, right? So we're turning off the short side calculations. So because remember, those two calculations are two totally separate calculations, right? And remember, they're two separate plots in BloodHound. So if you open up BloodHound here, right? If you open up the indicators window and you look at BloodHound, right? There's two separate plots. There's a long confidence and a short confidence, right? And so each plot needs its own set of calculations, right? Just like every indicator. So just like the RSI, right? It has two plots, right? You can't calculate the average from the same calculation as the RSI, right? The average has its own additional calculation, right? So the average is not the same calculation as the RSI. So same with BloodHound, right? So every plot has its own separate calculation there. So yeah. So when we use the evaluate, we're turning off one of those calculations there. Okay, so we have that. So now let's paste another one here. There we go. We'll connect that one in. And so this other one is going to be the cross down for this 60 level, right, to generate those short signals. So input B, there we go, is going to be the 60 level. Let's go find them. There we go. There's our 60 level right there. All right, and again, we're not interested in the cross ups, right? The 60 level and the 50 level are going to be used to generate short cross downs. So we'll set the evaluate to short only. There we go. So there's the cross down, cross down, cross down, right? So now we can combine these two together as kind of like one crossover solver using an OR node, right? And there we go. Look at that. Perfect. Kind of illustrates that exactly right there, right? So there's all the cross downs of the 60 and all the cross ups of the 40. So now, last step is we need to get, right, this cross up connected with that cross up, right? So here's the 50, right? There's the 50 cross up, and that's the 40 cross up. And let's name this here. So this will be the 40, 60 crossovers. There we go. So if we take an AND node, right, and maybe, a new person might think, okay, I'll just connect them together with an AND node, right? And what do we have? Nothing, right? And why is that? Well, because look, the 40 cross up is on this bar, and the 50, right? So the 50 crossover is on the next bar, right? They're on two totally separate bars. So when you connect them together, you get nothing because those signals are not on the same bar. So right, so basically the 40-60 crossovers come first, and the 50 comes, at least one bar later, maybe 2 bars later, right, or something like that. So we need to extend. We need to take the 40 and 60 crossover signals and extend them forward in time to give the RSI enough bars to then cross over the 50 level. Right? And so that's where the subject nature, of this comes into mind. So I'm going to take I could use a signal counter, or I could use a look back node here. But I'm going to take a signal counter and pop that in there. Let's connect that up, right? And so we can see here that, that's a signal counter. Hold on. I want the signal extender. There we go. Connect that up. And so we can see the signal extender, you know, it's defaulted to extending for 5 bars there. So, so this is where you're going to have to figure out, you know, based on what kind of pattern you're looking for, you know, is it acceptable for the RSI, you know, to maybe take 5 bars to go from crossing the 40 level to crossing the 50 level, or does it need to happen fairly quickly, right? So I'm going to set this down to 2 bars, right? So in other words, crossing the 50 needs to happen within the next 2 bars, so fairly quickly, like so. So now if we connect these together, there we go, and now we have our signal. Let's see if we have some others. Yeah, here we go. So we do have a bunch of cross down signals, right? So there's the cross down. And so that probably happened, yep, right there. And then, yeah, literally 2 bars later, it crossed down, right? Here, we can see here it only took 1 bar to cross below 60, right? And then cross 50. So, same again, right? Over and over and over again. There we go. And here, yeah, here we can actually see we do have this cross above 40, but it took a little too long for it to cross the 50 level there. All right, so that took a little too long there. You know, so you will have to kind of adjust the signal extender here, you know, to figure out, you know, what is acceptable, you know. So there we go. So if I increase the extend signals by 1 extra bar, you know, now we have that signal. So if I extended it up to 3, there we go. Now we got that signal there. So there we go. So I guess we'll leave it at 3 there, just in case. There, be a little more liberal there with that. So, all right. As I mentioned earlier, right, number 1 obviously is not needed, you know, because you always get a cross down of the 40 level before you can get a cross up of the 40 level, you know. But if, you know, if this kind of, you know, pattern, you know, I guess to call this, you know, if this kind of behavior here where the cross down is greatly, you know, occurs way before the cross back up, you know, if that is what you're trying to eliminate, and really what you're looking for are these nice, cleaner, you know, and quicker cross down, cross up type of things, you know, then as mentioned earlier, that is when you would need to actually look for that cross down condition, right? And so let's extend this question a little further out here, and look and figure out how do we do that, right? So we already kind of figured out, okay, how do we get the cross up of the 40 connected with the cross of the 50, right? So we're going to use this same group of logic here to now connect the cross down of the 40 to the cross up of the 40. That way we can eliminate eliminate that long gap between the two there. Let's see, I'll just paint it red just for good measure there. There we go. Yeah, so we'll kind of get rid of this long separation here between the two. All right. So to do that, I'm going to make a copy of all this and we'll paste it up above here. There we go. Right, so this is basically the framework here that we need to work with. And so what we need to do is adjust these solvers here, right, to look for the cross downs, you know, instead of the cross ups. So, all right, let's pull over our result node here, zoom in. All right. So let's take this guy here. All right. So this is actually going to be the cross down of the 40, like so. Okay. There we go. So here's our 40 crosses. And right. So where we're interested is the short output, right, which is identifying the cross downs. And we can do two things. We can swap the outputs, which, boom, now they went from short signals to long signals. Or we could use the cross against direction, right? So, you know, this really would be, I guess, I don't know. I was going to say this would be the proper way of doing it, but you know what? I don't think they're, you know, with the addition of these new, you know, signal modifiers up here, you know, I guess that kind of skews what's proper and what's not proper anymore, you know, just as long as the job gets done, right? So, but I'm going to go with the old way of doing this, which was, you know, we had to use the cross against direction there, right? So with the cross against direction, well, now we have short signals again, right? So let's enable the long output there, and yeah, okay, there we go. So there's all the cross down signals, right? But they look like so the cross down signals have been converted to a long signal, right? Because we're using the cross against. So basically this cross against is doing, you know, the same thing as what the swap button does, at least in this specific scenario, right? So there we go. So we have the cross down, right? A cross down signal converted to a long output, right? Because remember, this cross down actually is being used to generate a long signal here. So we need a long output, you know, to work with this, you know, because we need a long output because we're generating a long signal. So we're just going to kind of do the same for the 60, crossing that 60 level there. So this is going to be a cross up of the 60. And let's connect everything in there. And let's see, where's our 60? There we go. There's a bunch of 60 levels. There we go. And so again, we want to turn off the cross in direction, and we're going to use the crosses against direction. Set that to 1, right? And yeah, and we already have the short only already turned on for us, right? So there we go. So whenever the RSI crosses up, right, we're getting a short there. And I guess I'll just call this the pre-40-60 crossover signals, for lack of a better term there, right? And so let's see here. Oh, let's take a look at the OR node. Yeah, there we go. So, right, so now this time we have the cross up of the 60 level, but instead of getting a long for crossing up, we're getting a short for crossing up, right? So we reversed, we kind of, switched the signals around. So, all right. And so now, right, we need to connect, let's zoom in here, right? So we have this cross down, which then needs to be connected to this cross up, which happens, let's see, 2 bars later. Yeah, 2 bars later. Right, so there we go. So we have our signal extender there again, and I'll leave it set to 3 again, but this is where you kind of have to figure out, how quick of a cross down and cross back up, are you looking for in your pattern? Is it does it really need to be this kind of quick, cross down, cross up scenario, or is it acceptable to allow this to play out for a few more bars, right? That's the subjective nature of it there. So, and then let's see, also to make sure that things don't get out of hand, so for example, right, this cross down, right, we can see that the long outputs last long enough for the final crossing of the 50 level, right? So if you look at that, really, this almost is doing nothing here. So really you could just pull this out, disconnect that, right, not even use it, and so if we connect that up, let's see, move that over there, so connect that result node in, pull this over, and so now if we connect that in, right, there we have it. So we still have our signal right there. And let me find, yeah, there we go. So we have a cross down, and then a cross up, and then we get our cross up right there. So I'm going to see if I can find a specific scenario here. Yeah, here we go. So we have the cross down, and then the cross up and the cross up, but no signal there, right? So because this cross down, right, it took way too long before the RSI crossed back up of the 40 level there, right? So so we can see that, depending on exactly, what type of behavior from the RSI you're looking for, really we've kind of uncovered that you really only need one or the other condition, before looking at that final, crossing of the 50 level, right? So, yeah, depends on, what, it depends if, if these various crossover points, how many bars is allowed to go between, the different crossover points there. Looking at this, right? So we need either one or the other, right? And so let's see, with this one, let's do this. I'm going to rename this here. All right, so this is a cross down of the 40 versus a cross up of the 60. There. So there you have it. So you're only going to need one of these groups of logic here, combined with the final condition of crossing over that 50 level there. So, yeah. Let's see. And my guess is probably, right, this signal extender probably needs an extra bar. You know, again, you just kind of have to look through the chart and figure out exactly, you know, how many bars between the crossover, you know, levels there, you know, is really necessary for your system, you know, right? And obviously that's going to vary depending on the chart type that you're working with. You know, my guess would be, you know, this is a minute chart. So if you're working on a range chart, you know, you'll probably see an extra bar or two before that RSI crosses from one level to the other, you know, and things might happen really quickly on a Renko chart there. You know, like for example, yeah, this probably came from a Renko chart. That would be my guess. Yeah, some snappy behavior there. You know. So, all right. Anyways, I think that does it for this question here.